Thank you. Councillor Reynolds, what you indicated you had a question there before. You've jotted it down, no doubt.
Well, I've actually got about 1 million questions.
1 million?
Quite an exaggeration. But thanks very much for your presentation, Alex, and welcome to the Bay. As you can see, there is a huge amount of interest and concern locally. And, so anyway, I'll just set the ball rolling with. You mentioned that through the 3 stages you will own 50% of the oil. Is that correct?
Not exactly. It will be the way that I'm not an expert in the contract itself, but if we go through phase 1, if we make it through phase 1, the way the deal was structured between us and TAG, we will own 50% of the permit area in a very global area. And if we go phase 2, there's a trigger point that will be 50% of a larger area. And then if we make it through phase 3, then it's 50% of whatever the permit area is at that point.
So presumably TAG Oil owns the other 50%?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So in effect, New Zealand doesn't get to own any of the oil that you find?
I think New Zealand owns all of the oil that we find. I understand the way the law is structured. I'm not a legal expert on the permit side or the way central government is structured it, so I hesitate to be able to answer that with any good knowledge. I think the central government guys should probably, I don't understand and the reason from an Apache perspective.
That to Bryce, actually.
So the way it works is a permit is essentially purchased from the government, and oil that is taken from the ground, the New Zealand government receives royalties from. So the government owns a resource in the ground and is essentially selling the rights to someone to take it out of the ground and process it and use it.
So when it's in the ground, New Zealand owns it, and as soon as you take it out of the ground, you guys own it?
I believe that would be the model.
So it's actually not much economic benefit to New Zealand when it's in the ground, and neither is it much benefit to us when it's under the ground.
I would suggest it's, I'm not sure if it's zero benefit in the ground. I can't comment on that, because what I've learned since I've been here is the people that are closest to that land have a really close tie on everything that's down there. So I want to be careful not answering that inappropriately. But also, I think if the oil comes out of the ground, if you look at other jurisdictions around the world, probably even in New Zealand, if the oil comes out of the ground and there is a production environment, I think New Zealand benefits quite substantially.
How's that?
Well, there's I know in direct revenue, there's pretty substantial. If there's a lot of oil, it's all relative to how much comes out. There's the direct revenue to government from royalties. I would think if their employment opportunities increase, service sector opportunities, people start small businesses to service the different aspects of an oil and gas operation. We've seen this in other areas. There's pretty substantial opportunities, not just for government, but also through taxation, indirect taxation, direct taxation. Probably significant opportunities for local people to have businesses.
Councillor, do you have any, these are philosophical questions and need to be asked and answered, but do you have any process questions?
I've got a number of questions, which just depends on how much time you're going to allow me. I know other people have questions as well.
That's true, but I mean, we're here to hear, we haven't had a consent lodged yet. We're here to talk about the process, how that might work. I mean, geographically in Hawke's Bay would be an interesting question. As an example of one I might ask. I mean, could you just, there's a map of Hawke's Bay behind you. I'm not sure whether one or the other of you may be able to point out where we're talking here. I suspect Bryce can actually, if he has something. just, we're right on the southern boundary there, are we?
Our current exploration is down here.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be drilling one well
Thank you.
near Ponga Howe.
Right, thank you.
I'm interested in Liz's questions.
No, you're not. Not today. Any other questions, Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that briefing on what's going on, but you did refer to that you're not familiar with the regulatory process here, but obviously you are getting advice from somebody who's familiar. Can you give us an indication of what consents need to be applied for at which stages? And as this council, although we've been told by our manager of our regulatory role in it, we don't control land use, so do you need consents also from the territorial authority?
What we have done this last week is talk to the different councils we've gone around, sat down and with the help that we've got here locally that understand the district plans and the regional plans a little better, gone through and kind of said, well, this is what we believe we require in terms of the various consents, and just to make sure we're going down the right road. Honestly, I didn't bring those tables with me, but I'd be happy to make sure they're here this afternoon and you can have them, distribute them. There's a variety of consents. I believe there's and I'm not a regulatory expert here, certainly, but there's a difference between the consents required from the regional councils versus the district councils. And I believe the land use is a district council consenting process. I just know that from remembering what was on those tables. Where we're at in the process, you know, we've done that homework. We've got a lot of people going through the plans, making sure we understand them, starting to provide what we believe for each of those consent requirements, the different assessments that would be of interest or required to support our application to proceed. Those are in process now with a variety of people working on them. Does that answer your question?
And I'm sure we will get a list at some stage of the type of consents that discharge and water takes, etc., that will be required.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor, and then Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Alex, for your presentation. Given the global experience of your company, how does the area we're looking at rate geologically, or how challenging is it likely to be geologically, physically, in terms of access on the surface and politically, too, for that matter?
Well, I'll speak first from a subsurface perspective. Where I come from, there's one of the provinces is Saskatchewan. It's a great province. It's flatter than this tabletop for almost all of the province. So you can imagine the subsurface as you go down is equally flat. So if you're looking for a particular layer or reservoir underneath there, it's fairly continuous, it's not broken. This is, as I'm sure you all know, this is very complex geology, and subsurface is a good, or the surface is a good indication of how complex it is below. That's why it's truly an exploration game. You know, where there's many folds, there's lots of places just from the course, some of the historical seismic that's been done. You know, we can see where in some places it's actually not just rolling, but it's flipped over on itself. So it's pretty complex. Probably we've been in other areas that are equally complex. California, for example, has got similar type geology in some places. And there's a clay we have there that's very similar to this in nature. In terms of, you know, I'll speak more from, again now, from the stakeholder, public, iwi, landowner piece. I'll be honest, New Zealand is a great place to work, to come here, you know, even from Canada, which I love. I think everyone has been great questions, great engagement from people that we talked to, landowners, iwi, a lot of interest and a lot of concerns. We're not, upset about either. I think it's more about, understanding that we're here to take a pretty cautionary approach to this. More than happy to attempt as much as we can to respect both the heightened interest and the heightened concerns that are there, and try to shed as much light as we can on what we're doing, and hopefully prove ourselves with good operations.